Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the AnthroPuzzled podcast. I'm your host, Abby Letzinger, and every 2 weeks we'll explore how anthropologists are forging unique career paths beyond the usual academic sphere. Tune in, get inspired, and start piecing together your own career puzzle within the world of anthropology. On today's episode, we have Shane Townsend, who graduated from Millsaps College with a bachelor's in anthropology. Anthropology, he says, has given him a varied career in service and story. He responded to the 9/11 Pentagon attack, Hurricane Katrina, and search and rescue events. He has served as a Peace Corps volunteer, a nonprofit leader, and a diplomat. He's an independent writer and senior associate at an engineering firm where he helps communities build food, economic, and climate resilience. How are you doing today, Shane?
Hey, good morning, Abby. I'm doing well. How are you?
I am doing great, just getting over a cold, but hopefully that doesn't affect this at all. So, what is it that you do and why is it important?
Yeah, I've often lamented the fact that I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. But I was fortunate early on to learn something about myself, and that's that I'm really most alive when I'm serving others and when I'm somehow involved in story, whether I'm hearing someone's story or earning a story myself or telling the story somehow. So, every day, whatever organization I'm with or whatever my role is, I'm out there looking for opportunities to do both, to serve others and to get involved in story somehow. And in practice, I guess that looks like a lot of listening. People love to talk. And when I'm eager to listen, some people lead me to problems and others lead me to solutions. And, my job at that point is to matchmake and to say, okay, now understanding what I understand about this story, who out there could have a solution? And how do we need to retell this story in a way that will matter to them, that will give them, what it is they're thirsty for? And, that whole exercise on both sides is really service as I see it, why it's important. I mean, I believe that our debt is greater than our due. I think it was Kurt Vonnegut who said, we're all here to help each other get through this thing. And I think that's right. We're here to help one another. And that's why it's important, I believe.
Yeah, and what kind of led you to this career path?
I think it chose me, I felt like a leaf from the stream, really. I grew up surrounded by, rural people and watermen who took care of the community around them. And if somebody needed help, you helped them. And those same people, when they weren't helping each other or working, they were together telling stories, for hours and hours and hours. And, they were my heroes, right? For the way they lived and the way they worked and the way they told stories and how important stories were to them. I mean, the story really shaped the lives of those folks. And, when I went off to college, I was the first one in my family to do that. So I didn't have a model really, or a career map or anything like that. I just had these values that I had picked up from my community and deep interest in serving others and then people's stories. And so I just kind of pursued that, and as opportunities came along, I jumped on the ones that seemed right. Obviously Millsaps College was a big part of the path. It gave me what may be the most important thing for a student, which is a mentor in Dr. George Bay, who, was really influential throughout my entire life. And, that was just as important, I think, as the anthropology degree. But, the anthropology degree helped me see how culture shapes really everything we do. And it set me up for a master's program that was very marketable. And it got me in some really interesting opportunities.
Yeah, and I see that you were a Peace Corps volunteer. What is that whole process and experience like?
Oh, yeah. I think it's changed some. But so when I did it, it was just 20 years ago now. But you go and you apply, right? And then it was crickets. Like for any government job, you're not going to hear from the government for way longer. Like you could give birth to a baby elephant. It takes so long. And finally, I got a package in the mail, and it was these photocopies that looked like it was like 27th generation photocopies of an invitation letter and a map of Bolivia. And they said, you have 2 weeks to show up at the airport. And so I sold everything and gave away my dog and showed up at the airport. And We spent one day in a hotel with the fellow aspiring volunteers, and then we went out to host families, which was really, really something. My host family, their first language was Quechua. We were near Kikoyo in Bolivia in the highlands. And their second language was Spanish, and I only spoke English. I didn't really have any other language at all. So there was a lot of hand gesturing and acting out needs and things of that nature. But living with them for 3 months and 6 hours a day of language training and just spending time with them was really wonderful. And then during that time, that first 3 months training period, in addition to your language training, you're doing cross-cultural training. You're getting some training in economic development, community development rather, and various other things. Whatever your area of work will be, basic sanitation, building latrines or whatever. But then you get sent out to your community of service, and the way it was for me anyway, they buy you a bus ticket and say see you later, and 12 hours later you show up where you don't know anyone and all of that. But what a great experience. And, I highly recommend anyone doing it, because to leave everything comfortable and everything that and go and live the lives of another, and to live as a de facto immigrant and outsider, and do those things and connect with people of another culture on human terms, right? Without the shadow of government or necessarily faith or any of those things, just people being people. I don't know if there's anything more valuable for a young person to do. And I don't know, if there's much more valuable for a young person to do for their home country, America, or, the community in the United States.
How long are the stints that you guys do being a volunteer? Like, how long are you abroad for? Is there a minimum time requirement?
Yeah, so it's typically 27 months. So it's 3 months of training and then 2 years in the field, but kind of like a prison sentence that lay you off with a good behavior 1 month early. If so, most people leave at 26 months. Because the first, well, you've seen that graph, right? The first, I think, 3 months you hate everybody there, and then the next 6 months you think you're in heaven, and then the last 3 months you hate everybody again. And so by the time it's time to go, you're typically pretty ready, but you will have had some amazing experiences and lifelong friends. I mean, honest to goodness, the closest relationships I've ever had in my entire life, apart from my wife and my kids, are the friendships that were built in Bolivia, mostly Americans, but we were from all different walks of life. And, we talk and share things, often. And, the friends you make in that context, those are friends like none other, and you'll have them for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I did a study abroad program when I was in undergrad. So it's not exactly like the Peace Corps, but, living in another country and staying with the host family and meeting up with all these other individuals who are coming from other countries to study in the same place. Even though I haven't talked to those individuals in, oh God, it's going on like 8 years now, they'll still like check in on me every once in a while. Two of the girls, one was from Singapore and the other one was from Japan. They actually sent me a video prior to my wedding being like, oh, congratulations. And I haven't talked to these ladies in like years. But the fact that they were like, oh, I'm thinking of you, I'm just like, oh, makes my heart. So that's something I always recommend to individuals when they're in undergrad. If it's something that they are provided the opportunity for, or they can afford to do a study abroad program, especially if you're going into anthropology, because a lot of anthropology is getting to know people and being in different areas and studying cultures. And the Peace Corps almost kind of sounds like, an anthropologist going out and doing ethnographic work in kind of like a similar way of, you're going to another country to help individuals. An anthropologist is going to another country or even their own community to study a particular culture.
Sure. Yeah. No, there's some similarities for sure. And I think it hadn't really occurred to me, but I think in the United States, we don't really have rites of passage, right? I mean, you could make the case that getting a driver's license is the only rites of passage that we all share. But there's something like this, an experience like that, and you go through that together. It's very similar, right? You form these bonds. There's this shared experience. There's this duress. There's these highs and lows, and you come out the other side knowing that you've seen, what you and the people around you really are, and for better or for worse. And there's definitely a before and after with an experience like that for sure.
Yeah. Is it easier to get into the Peace Corps when you're a younger, unmarried individual? Because since it's a 27-month long stint, it'd kind of be hard away from your spouse for almost 2 years or over 2 years if you are married, unless your spouse is willing to go with you.
Yeah, I think it would probably be easier to decide to apply to the Peace Corps if you were young and single. But a good friend of mine who I actually did Peace Corps with in Bolivia, he came in the year behind me. And then we came back and we were both working Hurricane Katrina. Well, he got married and then he and his wife actually joined up together again. So when Abby and I moved to the Philippines to run a nonprofit there, he and his wife, Buck and Kelly, they moved to the Philippines to serve as volunteers again. And they had a tremendous experience. It was very different than the experience that he and I had as single people. He had, I would dare say, a lot more emotional stability, right? Having someone, with him all the time, and someone that he knew had his back and all of that. But yeah, people do it. And Peace Corps is really good about being open and inviting to whoever wants to come that is qualified in some kind of a way, right? I think a lot of undergraduates who do apply maybe don't have the practical skills to really make an impact, or there's a limit to the amount of impact they can make based on their limited professional experience. That's one scenario. There's another scenario where people go in mid-career or later in life, and they're able to step in and do meaningful work immediately. I went after I had finished my graduate program and post-grad, and I had already been doing emergency management for a time before I went in. And so I was able to go in and find good work immediately with the organization itself, helping them do their emergency management plans and design exercises and training, and help with their safety and security issues and things like that, in addition to the work I was meant to be doing, which is a little slower to develop. You have to build relationships and learn social capital and all that before you start, expecting people to do what you want them to do.
And even though the title is Peace Corps volunteer, do you guys get paid while you're abroad?
Yeah. So everybody hold on to the arms of your chair. I made a grand total of $200 a month while I'm in the Peace Corps. Now that was 20 years ago. But here's the thing. It sounds like nothing, but let me tell you, I think the average income, maybe even household income down there was $100 a month. So I was living well. So my $200 a month, covered place to live, food, travel around the country on the, buses and things, and extra money for extracurriculars and the occasional iced fermented beverage and so on. So I had plenty. Yeah, I had plenty. And if you have, like most people who it would even occur to do Peace Corps, have a safety net in the form of a bank account, or in the form of parents who are willing to, really boost that income with an extra $25 a month, and you can go crazy. I'm sure they usually not much more, but they make sure that you live well in the country. And two, I'll say, you will never have as good of health care in your life again as you do in Peace Corps, because you've got a dedicated staff to handle it. But you'll be seeing a lot of them.
Oh, wow. That's insane. But I mean, like, when you really think about it, when you go to some of these countries, the conversion rate from USD to what it costs in their country, because when I went to Prague in the Czech Republic, I was shocked at how cheap everything was. Like, for a 24-hour bus pass, it was like 25 cents. Whereas over here in America, that couldn't even get you on a bus for like 20 minutes. Um, So definitely in a lot of other countries, depending on what country you go to, because I did my study abroad program in Switzerland, and that was a hefty penny. Um, some of the countries is definitely a lot cheaper than others, depending on where you are.
And so Peace Corps is only going to operate in countries where, and this isn't why, but they only operate in countries where our dollar is doing pretty well and the cost of living is pretty low, right? Because they're only working in mid income countries or lower. So you'll have an advantage.
Yeah. So did you do the Peace Corps prior to being a foreign service officer?
I did, and I tell you why. Well, a couple of reasons. My dad, his dream as a young man had been to join the Peace Corps, but he got invited to go fight in the Vietnam War instead. So that kind of planted the seed. I mean, nobody in my community growing up went to college or joined the Peace Corps. These weren't things that happened. It was very much a working class, working poor community. But he planted that seed of the Peace Corps. But then, so in graduate school, what I thought I wanted to do was do international disaster relief. And the insights I got from people around me were, okay, your best bet of getting into that is going to go do Peace Corps, to do Peace Corps first, right? You'll get a second language, you'll get 2 years of field experience, and combined with that master's degree, you're going to be fine. But if you don't do it, you're really going to struggle to get your foot in the door. So I did it for like 3 reasons, right? Because my dad had wanted to do it, because it would be a pathway, I thought, to that next thing I thought I wanted to do, and to have that second language. So yes, I did it about a decade before I joined the Foreign Service.
Okay. And what does a foreign service officer do? Are they kind of like a diplomat?
Yeah, that's exactly what. And there's several branches of the Foreign Service. There's the State Department. There is Foreign Agricultural Service, which is under USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture. There's the Foreign Commercial Service, which is through the U.S. Department of Commerce. And then there is USAID, the U.S. Agency for International Development. In the field, the embassies are all run by State Department. I was in the Foreign Agricultural Service. So in general, I would say for all of those types of foreign service officers, all of those diplomats, what they do is build relationships. And at the end of the day, they're building relationships, and you do that by listening. It goes back to story again, right? Listening to the stories around you, understanding what folks are thirsty for, and, where it's possible and mutually beneficial, or aligns with U.S. policy, or doesn't, detract too terribly far from, then you help them get that, right? And, sometimes your role is to write 50 briefing memos in a week, or write a speech for the ambassador, or, other times it's, you are the one representing the United States in an event with foreign dignitaries, or maybe negotiating some kind of an agreement with a foreign country. I was fortunate. I came in at a really interesting time, and when I was still in Washington before I deployed, I was able to be the desk officer for FAS while we reestablished diplomatic relations between U.S. and Cuba. So we didn't even have an embassy at first there. We had something akin to an embassy, but then when we had an embassy, it was really small and we didn't have a lot of space there. So USDA was running the kind of the de facto ag office from DC. And so we did a lot of work with the Cubans in DC, and a lot of conversations back and forth with the Cubans in Cuba, and setting up events and hosting trainings and exchanges and all these kind of different things, negotiating agreements and things like that. So it's really an interesting time. And then eventually, my wife and family and I moved to Kenya, to Nairobi, and for a time I led the Office of Ag Affairs at the U.S. Embassy there, and we worked on food and ag and across East Africa, so Rwanda, Uganda, Burundi, Malawi, Tanzania, and Kenya, and we were doing everything from multi-million-dollar food assistance programs to kind of facilitating agricultural trade between the two countries, hosting fellowships, various different things. but no 2 days as a diplomat looks the same. I mean, this morning, we could be, hitting at a badminton competition, hitting the first, shuttlecock or whatever. That's your big event for the day. And then you go back to the office and you're sending 90 emails and filling out some kind of travel requisition form. I mean, it's like any job, you've got so many different things to do. But when you're doing the most interesting stuff, it's like nothing else.
How much did you get to travel during that time as being a foreign service officer, like internationally?
Yeah, so I mean, we travel a lot, and it depends on your post. A lot of your diplomatic posts are going to be single country posts. So that means that you live in the capital of X country, and then your travel will be around that country, and that's what you do. And you're traveling around. Maybe you're having a lot of meetings with business folks or leaders in government, or on the ag side, we would do crop surveys to try to understand what's happening with the crops and with droughts and pests look like, and forecasting food supplies and things like that. But when it's a single country, 99% what you're doing is right there in that country. But with a regional post like Nairobi, we were the ag office for 6 countries or something across East Africa. So it was a lot of travel. Not only the travel around that single country, then the idea is that you would do that same kind of travel for each of the countries within your region. So it's a lot of travel. What it often comes down to is two things. One is budget, right? What is the administration of the time allocated for your budget for all of your travel? And then the second thing is looking at return on investment, in which really each trip having to earn its existence, right? Do I go to A with this outcome, or do I go to B, or whatever else with this other outcome, and which is really better for what we're trying to do here? So that really determines what you do. But it can be tough for the spouse, right? So we really learned this when we moved to the Philippines, which was the first place we moved overseas. And we landed, and I had a team pick me up and put me to work immediately. And then Abby, was kind of in this on the 28th floor of a high rise in downtown Manila, right, or in Makati, and didn't know anybody and all of that. And then, where my struggle was getting caught up and productive in work, her struggle was, how do I make a life here, right? And spouses often struggle with that. The good thing about the foreign service community, though, is that a good many of the foreign services officers are accompanied. They have a spouse or a partner or what have you. And there is a lot of effort to connecting those spouses and those partners and those families to create that social network and that community. And at some posts it's really strong, at other posts it's less strong, but it's invaluable.
Yeah, I've been trying to convince my husband to let us move abroad for a couple of years, but he's very content where we are here because he's an engineer and he's like, oh, I can get, tons of jobs over here being an engineer. He's like, I'm not sure how much I'd be able to find in other countries and, whether or not I can work for their governments and whatnot. But I'm like, at least once, we got to at least try to go
So
abroad and stay there.
oddly enough, the State Department is often looking for engineers. So maybe that's your angle.
Yeah, start like slowly just leaving listings around the house. Yeah.
Apply for jobs for him without letting him know, nefarious things like that.
Yeah. So, do you feel that obtaining an anthropology degree has broadened your viewpoint on the world?
I mean, yeah. I mean, I think people who would even entertain the idea of getting a degree in anthropology are already interested in the world, right? And interested in people and in humans. And yeah, I was raised in my grandmother's boarding house, which was full of all kind of characters and just really interesting humans. And so from early on, I was interested in people and why folks are so weird. And the anthropology program, really, it kind of grabbed me by the shoulders, right? Like I had that inherent interest, and it really grabbed me by the shoulders and kind of pointed me at the world, and showed me where to look and how to see, and gave me some tools to help me try to understand what I was seeing. But for me, at least, there came that kind of a service value where I said, okay, well, I see now, and that's not enough. I need to actually do something. So, the program at that point set me up for a graduate program where I could get some widely applicable skills that would help set me up to be part of the solution most anywhere I go. And that was, that was a degree in planning. But yes, absolutely. Anthropology degree it's really been a ticket for, let me say this, anybody who's interested in being like a servant, like in serving the community, serving the world, serving the people around them, and somebody who is interested in making a life out of story, be that creating interesting stories or finding the stories of others, stories that aren't being told or that nobody's listening to, or, figuring out how to take those unheard stories and retell them in a way that matters to people with resources. There may not be a better degree than anthropology as part of your education, right? And I think maybe over time, what I didn't necessarily expect, but what the degree program has done for me is really give me a better understanding of the individual, right? Like I didn't go into the anthropology trying to understand the individual, right? It was culture and, those things. But over time, understanding, what I came to understand kind of took away some layers of the onion to just see the person inside, if that makes any sense. But yes, it's broadened my view of the world for sure.
What's the best piece of advice you'd offer to someone who's interested in getting into what you do or have done?
Oh boy. Here's what I'll say. If somebody were to close their eyes and think about the thing they want for themselves, like what is the thing that you want, right? Write that down and then ignore what you think you should want, ignore what you think people want for you or what people want you to want, but go back to that piece of paper that has that thing that you want and pursue only that, right? Pursue only what you want and try not to get caught up in all this other stuff. Because if what you want is to teach anthropology 101 to as many people as you possibly can, amazing. You will probably not buy an island anywhere, but that's okay. You don't need it because you'll have what you want, right? And if what you want is to understand how to speak more effectively as a company, like in marketing or something, and to better speak to and reach and influence customers or clients, great, do that. But only chase what you want, because you can spend your life chasing what other people want you to have.
Yeah, I think that's a really good piece of advice because there's so many, especially when you're young, there's so many voices telling you what you should and should not do. Like when I was going to college, my parents were like, you should get a business degree because it'll be beneficial to you. You can use it for anything. You'd be a great CEO, that kind of stuff. So I'm like, okay, I'll go to college for business because I wasn't sure what I really wanted to do. And then about a year into my program, I'm just like, God, these classes are so boring. So it was always like, oh, I have to go to class or whatever. And then I had taken like an anthropology 101 class, and I'm like, wow, this is actually pretty interesting and pretty cool. And so I went ahead and added a minor of anthropology to my degree. And after studying abroad, I'm like, you know what? These classes are actually a lot of fun. I'll just go ahead and major in anthropology as well. So that's when I got both my business degree and my anthropology degree and finished within 4 years. And, the biggest thing that like I've always wanted to do is like, if I can just travel and somehow get paid to do that and see the world and interact with those kind of individuals, then that'd be great. I just haven't figured out how to get paid for doing that. So I'm currently going back to school to get a data analysis and systems engineering degree as well to help with job prospects. But when I think about it, I'm like, my parents wanted me to get the business degree, and my husband wants me to get the engineering degree. But the really only degree that I decided for myself was my anthropology degree because it was just interesting. And, maybe one day I'll get to a position where I can, focus more on anthropological work and all that kind of stuff. But for now, I just have my podcast and I get to talk to interesting anthropology individuals. So, what kind of changes do you wish to see within the industry that you've worked in?
Yeah, here's what I'll say. I think I've worked in every sector, right? The public sector, private sector, nonprofit. And what I would love to see in every sector, in every industry that I've been involved in, is I would love to see more anthropologists involved, right? Or at least people with some anthropological perspective, right? Every business is a human business. Every endeavor is a human endeavor. And, the unfortunate truth is that we often see people trying to get things done without acknowledging that there's humans on both sides of that, and that culture is so heavily at play all of the time, and that there is a way to foresee, maybe hotspots and maybe prevent them, whatever. But I think every industry would certainly benefit from more anthropologists and more people who are focused on the human they're trying to deal with.
I definitely agree. I feel like everyone in every culture is trying to say the same thing, but in a way that their people will understand it based on their culture and perspective.
So like right now, for example, a lot of my role is I'm a matchmaker, right? Like I'm listening to stories over here. What's not happening? Why? Why does it matter? And then I'm looking around and I'm saying, oh, well, that person over there, they could probably do something about it. And they would probably like to if they only knew. But then if I use the language from, the first group to talk to the second group, they don't have a clue what I'm talking about. And if I use the language from the second group to talk to the first group, again, they're lost. And so you have to be, cultural interpreters, right? And there's so little acknowledgement of the value of that until it's done, right? It's hard to sell. Like, hey, here's what I'm going to do for you. It's hard to sell that. But when you do it, people notice and they say, oh, well, that's cool. Let's do that some more. You know?
And so, what do you just absolutely love about your job and the industry you've worked in?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's a segue there, but my absolute favorite thing about what I'm doing right now is connecting good, capable humans to solve a problem. I mean, it is so rewarding to find something that nobody is trying to fix, right? And then find somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who could be part of the solution. And then directing that thing to happen in a way where everybody walks away feeling like they're the center of the universe and they're successful and wonderful and all of that. That's the good stuff, man.
So, is there anything we haven't discussed today that you'd like the listeners to know about?
I guess just a couple of things. So I guess number one, I would say here's some things I wish someone would have told me when I was getting started. And I would say earn your social capital before you try to spend it. Right. Don't walk into an interaction with your hand out expecting something. Get in there and work and earn people's trust, and don't ask for anything in return. And eventually it'll be your turn. But earn some social capital. And then even more important than that really is maybe that, very few things are truly zero sum. Somebody doesn't have to lose for you to win. Everybody can win. And when everybody wins, the wins probably come more regularly, and look for those. But, and otherwise, hey, consider me a resource, connect with me on LinkedIn. And if I can help folks do things, there's nothing I like better.
Awesome. Yeah. And I will definitely put your LinkedIn on your episode page. But other than your LinkedIn, is there anywhere else where listeners can learn more about you and what you do?
Oh, that's the best spot. That's the best spot. I've had a pretty subdued social media presence just because of the nature of my work over the years. So LinkedIn's the way to go for sure.
Awesome. Well, I had a great time chatting with you today. Thank you so much for coming on my podcast and taking the time out of your day.
Yeah, Abby, thank you. And I appreciate you doing what you're doing for anthropology grads. It's a huge service, and it's good stuff. So thank you.
Yes, of course. Well, if you ever have any, future career updates or anything like that, I'd love to have you back on and, inform and teach some new anthropology students.
That sounds great. Thank you so much,
Uh,
Abby.
of course, you have a great rest of your day.
You too. Bye bye.
Thanks for listening to another episode of AnthroPuzzled. This show is produced by me and is distributed in collaboration with the American Anthropological Association. A special thanks to Cheyenne Brewer for editing the website, Leah Akers for the incredible logo design, and to AnthroPuzzled's intern Fiona for the episode descriptions. The music is courtesy of Chad Crouch, aka Poddington Bear of Sound and Picture. If you have any questions, you can reach me at abby.letsinger@anthropuzzled.com or as AnthroPuzzled on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Until next time.